Something that you may have noticed recently is that I'm doing a lot of mechanic work and not a lot of modifications. Unfortunately, the reason for this is the fact that none of my 3 previous project cars are running at this moment. The Z needs a new tire and some work on the exhaust, the Miata just has so many transmission issues that we're working with, and the Mustang needs a new brake pedal sensor. So we're starting with that today, getting it cleaned up, getting it working. So, let's go! I couldn't help but watch the Miata as well while I had the cleaning supplies out, so this one also looks nice, so 2 non-running nice looking cars. The issue with the Mustang that's keeping it from driving is that it won't shift out of park, and this is being caused by the brake pedal sensor needing to be replaced. So here I'm pressing the brakes, but nothing's happening, no lights are coming on, so we can narrow down that the pedal sensor is the issue. It's just a small little $10 sensor that lets the car know when the brakes are being pushed, that way it lets you shift out of park and into drive. The sensor is connected straight to the brake pedal itself, there's a cotter pin holding it on, and there are also 2 spade connections that you'll need to take off. The installation is pretty simple, it's just removing all those parts, pulling the sensor off, replacing the new one, putting the cotter pins back in, and then re-plugging in the assembly. Something that really helped me with the install was the camera. I was able to use the screen to look at to monitor where my hand was at in relation to the cotter pin and the plugs. After that was installed, I had my brother hop in the car and press the brakes while I checked to make sure that the brake lights were now going on. With that working, the Mustang was complete and good to go. Or so I thought. Right as we were finishing, I decided to hop in the car and have my brother check the brake lights for himself. I pressed the brake and immediately it went to the floor with no resistance. I heard a whooshing sound like air leaving the system. I got out of the car, I had my brother press on the brakes, and I found that the front driver's brake line had blown. It was one of those things that are just out of your control. So I decided to take a break and tell you about the coldest water bottles. Did you know you can put Dr. Pepper in at the coldest water bottles? I've started transitioning from drinking water to only drinking soda as a way to improve my protein intake. And I'm pleased to say that at the coldest water bottles could hold almost 3 full Dr. Proteins. They keep them cold for the whole time you're crying about your cars constantly breaking, although they do explode. So, slight disclaimer. Anyway, back to crying over spilled brake fluid. Continuing on with the Mustang, something that I'd been wanting to work on for a while were the seats. They're cool to look at and all, but they're honestly not that comfortable. I hooked up the driver's seat to the original motorized rails, which is cool in theory, but puts the racing seat at a super weird angle that you really can't fix by adjusting it. I had dismantled the original seats, but I thought I could reassemble them and put them back in the car, but unfortunately they were not only 2 disassembled, but I'd lost the bag of bolts to put it all back together. With the speed bump too large to jump without getting more parts, I turned my attention to the Miata that is just trying to die in peace. But being jacked up on Dr. Protein, I was not about to let that happen. So if you don't remember what's up with the Miata, last week we attempted to fix this transmission, but when we got it all back together, the clutch didn't want to fully disengage. I bled the clutch with no success, so I decided to get a new master cylinder. It's kind of hard to see, but I did find some fluid leaking from the old master cylinder, which is a good sign that this is the cause of the clutch refusing to fully disengage. The first thing that we need to do is take off the air intake, which I've done a million times at this point. So take it all off, put the screws back in the same bolt holes so you don't lose where they're at, and then that'll give you space to get to the master cylinder. Once you gain access to the master cylinder, make sure to put a rag underneath because brake fluid can eat through your paint pretty quickly or at least stain it, so you want to make sure that you're able to catch that. In order to get the master cylinder off, you need 2 12mm bolts taken off from the firewall and then 1 10mm for the hose itself. I'd very much recommend using a 10mm flare wrench for the clutch line. The reason being that if you don't, there's a decent chance that you could strip the fitting, and if you do that, then you're going to have an incredibly tough time getting the line back on. With the old one out, we replaced it with an OEM new one. The installation process, unfortunately I can't find the recorded clip for it, but before you reinstall the master cylinder you need to bleed it. The easiest way to do this is to pour brake fluid to the min line on the cylinder. Then you hold your thumb over where the clutch line will connect, then using a Phillips head screwdriver, press in on the piston of the master cylinder, and what this does is it has the cylinder suck fluid from the reservoir back into the cylinder itself. From there, installation is the exact reverse of the removal. The clutch line fitting can be a bit frustrating though, as it doesn't like to line up correctly even though it looks perfect, so just be patient and get the threaded started in before you tighten it all the way with the flare nut wrench. At this point, what you'd expect to see in the next clips would be me bleeding the clutch and then taking the car for its first drive as everything went perfectly. But that didn't happen. I spent a full hour bleeding the clutch to no avail, and after reading through the forums, they told me that in order to bleed the clutch, you just have to be persistent, as the clutch line is a weird pigtail design. So I tried again, still no success. After suggestions were given to get a new clutch line without a pigtail, I did that. But for now, I must wait for it to arrive. A full day of work, but no finished projects. And that's just how it goes sometimes. We all know that working on cars seems to have more downs than ups, but the struggle makes the reward that much sweeter. So when it seems like everything goes wrong, just take a second to sit back and remind yourself why you love cars so much in the first place.